This is a reading from The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, chapter 11. On control of the heart. Christ, my son, you have still many things to learn. The disciple, what are these, Lord? Christ, how you must frame your desires in accordance with my good pleasure. Matthew chapter 6, verse 10. And be not a lover of self, but an earnest follower of my will. Desires often inflame you and drive you violently onwards, but consider whether it be my honor or self-interest that moves you most. If I myself be the cause, you will be content with whatever I shall determine. But if self-interest is your hidden motive, this will be a hindrance and burden to you. Take care, therefore, not to rely overmuch on any preconceived desire without asking my counsel, lest you regret or become displeased at what first pleased you, and for which you were eager. For not every feeling that seems good is at once to be acted upon, nor is every feeling that runs contrary to your inclinations to be immediately rejected. It is sometimes necessary to restrain even your good intentions and endeavors, lest by over-eagerness your mind becomes distracted, lest by lack of discipline you cause offense to others, or lest you suddenly become confused and upset by the opposition of others. You must bravely and forcibly resist your sensual appetite, taking no account of what the body likes or dislikes, and struggle to subdue the unwilling flesh to the spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27. For it must be corrected and brought under control, until it is obedient in everything. It must learn to be content with little, to take pleasure in simple things, and not to complain at any hardship. Chapter 12. On learning patience. The disciple, O Lord God, I know that I need patience above all else. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36. For in this life there are many trials, for however earnestly I seek peace, I cannot escape struggle and sorrow. Psalm 31, chapter 10, or verse 10. Christ, this is true, my son, but my will is that you do not try to find a place free from temptations and troubles. Rather, seek a peace that endures even when you are beset by various temptations and tried by much adversity. James chapter 1, verse 2. If you say that you cannot endure much, how will you endure the fires of purgatory? Of two evils, always choose the lesser. Endeavor patiently to endure for God's sake all the ills of this life, that you may escape eternal punishment. Do you imagine that worldly men suffer little or nothing? Ask the most wealthy, and you will find it. You will not find it so. But you may say, they enjoy many pleasures and follow their own desires. In this way they make light of any troubles. Yet, even if they enjoy whatever they desire, how long will this last? The rich of this world will vanish like smoke. Psalm 68, verse 2. And no memory of their past pleasures will remain. But even in their lifetimes, they do not enjoy them without bitterness, weariness, and fear, for the very things whence they derive their pleasures often carry with them the seeds of sorrow. And this is but just, for having sought and followed pleasures to excess, they may not enjoy them without shame and bitterness. Ah, how short-lived and false, how disorderly and base are all these pleasures! Yet so besotted and blind are such persons, that like dumb beasts they bring death to their souls for the trivial enjoyments of this corruptible life. My son, do not follow your lusts, and do not be self-willed. Ecclesiasticus chapter 18, verse 30. Delight in the Lord, and he will grant you your heart's desire. Psalm 37, verse 4. If you would taste true pleasure and receive the fullness of my consolation, know this, that in the despising of worldly things and in the shunning of base delights shall be your blessing, and you shall win abundant consolation. The more you withdraw yourself from the comfort of creatures, the sweeter and more potent will be the consolations that you will find in me. But you will not find these at once, or without sorrow, toil, and effort. Old habits will stand in your way, but by better they will be overcome. St. Augustine, Confessions, chapter 8, verse 11, 8, 11, 25. The body will complain, but by fervor of the Spirit it can be disciplined. The old serpent, Revelations chapter 12, verse 9, will goad and disturb you, but by prayer he will be put to flight, and by profitable labor you will bar the wide path by which he comes to attack you. Chapter 13, on obedience after the example of Christ. Christ, my son, whoever strives to withdraw from obedience withdraws from grace, and he who seeks personal privileges loses those that are common to all. When a man is unwilling to submit freely and willingly to his superior, it is a sign that his lower nature is not yet under his control, but frequently rebels and complains. Therefore, learn to obey your superior promptly if you wish to subdue your lower nature, for the enemy without is sooner overcome if our inner fortress remains intact. There is no enemy more wicked or troublesome to the soul than yourself, when you are not in harmony with the Spirit, and you must have a very real scorn for self if you are to prevail against flesh and blood. It is because you are unwilling to yield your will to that of others that you are still full of self-love. It is so hard for you who are dust and nothingness to subject yourself to man for God's sake. When I, the Almighty and the Most High, who created all things from nothing, humbly subjected myself to man for your sake. John chapter 13, verse 14. I became the humblest and least of all men, that you might overcome your pride through my humility. Learn to obey, you who are but dust. Learn to humble yourself, earth and clay, and to bow yourself beneath the feet of all. Learn to curb your desires, and yield yourself to complete obedience. Direct your anger against yourself, and let no swelling pride remain in you. Show yourself so submissive and so humble that all men may trample over you and tread on you like the mud of the streets. Psalm 18, verse 42. Vain man, what right have you to complain? What can you, an unclean sinner, answer to any who reproach you, when you have so often offended God, and so many times deserved hell? But I have spared you. Ezekiel chapter 20, verse 17. For your soul was precious to me, that you might know my love, and be ever grateful for my favor. Also that you might give yourself constantly to true obedience and humility, enduring patiently any contempt laid on you. Chapter 14, on the secret judgments of God. The disciple. Lord, your judgments thunder against me. My limbs tremble and shake with fear, and my soul is horribly afraid. I stand awestruck, considering how the very heavens are not pure in your sight. Job chapter 15, verse 15. And if you found wickedness even among the angels, Job chapter 4, verse 18, and did not spare them, 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4, what then can I presume, who am but dust? Men whose deeds seemed praiseworthy have fallen into the pit, and I have seen those who had been fed with the bread of angels. For the very stars fall. Okay. And if you found wickedness even among the angels, and did not spare them, what can be my fate? The very stars fall from heaven. Revelations chapter 6, verse 13. What then can I presume, who am but dust? Men whose deeds seemed praiseworthy have fallen into the pit, and I have seen those who had been fed with the bread of angels. Psalm 78, verse 25. Delighted with pig's food. There can be no holiness, Lord, if you withdraw yourself. No wisdom can avail if you cease to guide. No courage can uphold if you cease to defend. No purity is secure if you are not guard. No watchfulness of our own can save us unless your holy care protects us. Psalm 127, verse 1. For if you abandon us, we sink and perish. Matthew chapter 8, verse 25. But if you visit us, we are raised up and live once more. We are unstable unless you strengthen us. We are cold and dull unless you kindle us to fervor. How humble and insignificant I am. If there is any good in me, it is as nothing. Lord, I submit myself in all humility to your unfathomable judgments. Psalm 36, verse 6. I acknowledge my utter nothingness. O greatness immeasurable! O sea that none can cross! Now I recognize myself as wholly and only nothing. Where now can pride lurk unseen? Where is now my former confidence in my virtue? All my empty conceit is overwhelmed in the depths of your judgment upon me. What is all flesh in your sight? 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 29. Can the clay boast against him who fashions it? Isaiah chapter 14, verse 9. Can a man whose heart is subject to God in truth be puffed up with empty boasting? Isaiah chapter 29, verse 16 and 64, verse 8. The whole world cannot exalt him who the truth has made subject to itself, nor can he who has fixed his whole hope in God be moved by the tongues of all who flatter him. For even those who talk thus are all nothing. They will pass away with the sound of their own words, but the truth of the Lord stands fast forever. Psalm 117, verse 2.